The federal election is behind us, and many are now wondering, what does this mean for the EV transition, the green energy trend, and decarbonisation around the nation? Some people have described this past election as a greenslide, while others have called it the climate election. What is clear is that voters voted and stated that climate change is an important issue. If you are interested in understanding the details of the election, how things currently stand, and what the implications could be for Australia, we'll leave a link after this video that you can check out with a deep dive. But for now, what is important to know is that Labor looks on track to secure a majority government, and there was a big swing towards the Greens and the Teal independents. We're heading into a new world. Anthony Albanese declared that he believes we can see the end to the climate wars, and that he envisages Australia can become a renewable energy superpower. We're heading into this next chapter with quite an interesting dichotomy. On the one side, Australia is one of the world's largest producers of thermal coal. There's significant industry, jobs, and a component of our GDP still attached to the fossil fuel sector. We have high levels of carbon emissions on a per capita basis. But then on the other side, there was a clear focus and evidence from the votes that the Australian people want action on climate change now. And so what are the policies? Labor went into the election with a policy of reducing emissions by 43% by 2030, and that we're on track to achieve net zero by 2050. The 2030 targets are in contrast to the initial coalition target of 26 to 28% reductions of emissions from the 2005 levels. Of course, the crossbench influence is going to be fascinating to watch, particularly with the Greens having the balance of power in the Senate and the rise of the Teal independents in the House of Representatives. For a bit of a context, the Greens, for example, have a 75% emissions target by 2030 and net zero by 2035, and the Teals had a 60% emissions reduction target by 2030. Of course, Labor came into the election with their Powering Australia plan. The focus was to create jobs, cut power bills, and reduce emissions by boosting renewable energy. They're aiming to ensure renewables make up 82% of the national energy market by 2030, and aiming to create an extra 600,000 jobs, with the majority in the regions as part of this Powering Australia plan. As we've discussed earlier, transitioning out fossil fuel workers and the industry is another question, and it's going to be a delicate thing that they have to navigate on this transition to reducing carbon emissions. In terms of the investment front itself, the Powering Australia plan aims at spurring $76 billion of public and private investment. The flagship policy from Labor was a $20 billion rewiring the nation, which was to invest $20 billion to modernise the electricity grid and to facilitate more renewable energy. There was up to $3 billion earmarked or to be allocated from Labor's National Reconstruction Fund. This was to be invested into a range of different areas, including investment into green metals, for example, steel, alumina, and aluminium. A co-investment of up to $100 million for 85 solar banks, and $400 million to install batteries in 4,000 plus communities. It's worth noting that 2030 is not that far away, and so to achieve some of these targets, we're likely to see an acceleration in terms of processes, focus, and plans to reach these. We do know that coming into this as well, Australia is relatively behind when compared to many other nations around the world. Targets are of course important, but the policies on how to reach them are going to be important for the actual follow-up themselves. We've seen a range of different initiatives like the Modern Manufacturing Initiative pop up as support for the industry. We'll continue to watch for more of the EV battery material space and other resources necessary for decarbonisation to come to the forefront of discussion. Of course, looking for further investment as well to catalyse the growth of these industries, particularly with the focus of onshoring, which we've seen in different sectors like lithium, graphite, nickel, and cobalt too. There are a range of considerations. We don't have all of the answers. We're going to continue to watch different policies and plans as we head towards these 2030 targets and important timeline. But some of the considerations include the targets currently, but what are the policies to get there, and how is the pathway set up? Will we see increased targets potentially as well, as we've talked about the rise of the Teals and the Greens on the back of this resounding vote in the election? Labor is still, at the time of this recording, still yet to claim that 76th seat that they need for the majority government. So that interplay and the dynamic between the crossbench and Labor is going to be important and fascinating to watch evolve as well. As we talked about, Australia has a significant footprint in the fossil fuels still. Australia is the world's largest exporter of LNG and currently the world's second largest producer of coal. It's a huge part of our economy and it has many jobs for many around the nation. So we need to navigate this transition, and there still is 100 plus new fossil fuel projects in the pipeline that's worth considering too. The corporate transition is another one. How will investment go? How will the focus on ESG, which continues to grow in importance, play out? The Mike Cannon-Brookes and the AGL discussion is an interesting dance that continues to evolve as well. And then prices. The renewable transition, it's important. but we're seeing prices continue to rise. And so, of course, the generation component is important for this transition to renewables, but so is prices and reliability. As we know, this has the ability to affect cost of living for individuals and for households, but also businesses as well, because electricity is such an important input cost. And as electricity prices rise, then this can put margins under pressure. Ultimately, Australia has been a laggard in terms of climate change policies. With this resounding shift in voter trends, it's going to be interesting to see if this can propel us towards becoming a leader on this front. If you're interested in the discussion about the recent election, here's another video that you can check out after this one. A big thank you for joining us. For now, stay well and happy investing.